what I love, I'm an adventure traveler and I love coming to different cultures and I adore India. So what I love is that when you consider that we construct these emotions dependent upon our environment and social upbringing, it enables us to understand cultures differently so that we can communicate with them better, because each culture will have a different view of emotion. Virtually everything is about communication. You know, when we communicate badly, we have conflict, we have war. Suddenly my father died, which was very unexpected. We thought he was extremely fit, but clearly not. And my dad used to say, Lynda, if there's anywhere you want to go that's spiritual, go to the Himalayas.
Hey, my dear listeners, welcome back to yet another episode of Inspire Someone Today. With us today is a voice behind the behavioral neuroscience who has dedicated her life in improving everyone's understanding of how the brain affects our behavior and how our behavior affects our brain. Isn't it something we all would want to know? And here is somebody who has over 25 years of experience in this very field. It's an absolute joy and pleasure to welcome Dr. Lynda Shaw on this episode of Inspire Someone Today. Lynda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Shri. Thank you.
Well, Lynda, this is a very interesting subject, interesting topic. So, cognitive neuroscientist, that is how you have been addressed as, and who is specializing in the unconscious processing of emotion and behavioral change. I think the very depiction of this is a tongue twister for me, and you have been in this for 25 years. Walk us through what are some of the significant discoveries that you have had, breakthroughs that you have had in cognitive neuroscience, and what has changed over the recent years?
Oh my goodness me, it changes considerably. We have neuroimaging equipment, clearly, and we have done for many years now, and that's enabled us so to be far more objective with which was once a quite a subjective topic. You had the wet sciences with dissection and the like, but it is the neuroimaging techniques that we have that's enabled us to support psychology theories and sometimes dispel psychology theories, which is great because it's adding to the massive toolbox and the knowledge font of knowledge that we have. It's superb, and every time there is a development in neuroimaging equipment, it enables us to see even more and understand even more. And of course, research is always based upon research before. There is always amazingly new, fascinating things coming out of the topic of neuroscience. The challenge is that we have, some wonderful neuroscientists around the world, and to keep up to date with everybody's research is nigh on impossible for one person. Try very hard to stay up to date with my knowledge of what's going on out there, but I tend to attract more with my searches more about the neuroscience research that's going on that's relevant to my specific field. And as you quite rightly mentioned, I was working with unconscious processing of emotion. And my profession is, now that I'm in the commercial world and out of academia, is that I talk about communication and business relationships. And of course, that does involve emotion. So one of the people that has shaken things up a little bit in recent times is Lisa Feldman Barrett. Her work on emotion and what she calls constructive emotion is a theory that has got some real traction. So if anyone who's watching and listening to your show, look up Lisa Feldman Barrett for the latest emotion research. And basically what she says, she takes much more of a holistic view of emotion. So rather than before emotion was in the limbic system, she now believes it's across regions in the brain. And we actually spontaneously construct an emotion in the moment to make sense of what is going on in front of us. And this is based upon our knowledge and our experiences and the way we have softwired our brain according to our social and environmental upbringing. So therefore, emotion isn't culturally specific. It is more culturally specific because of that. So whereas before we thought that there was a universal element to emotion, according to Lisa Feldman Barrett, there isn't. It's different for different cultures. So that's exciting and has a lot of connotations for further research and indeed the way that we interact and communicate with one another. What I love, I'm an adventure traveler and I love coming to different cultures and I adore India. So what I love is that when you consider that we construct these emotions dependent upon our environment and social upbringing, it enables us to understand cultures differently so that we can communicate with them better because each culture will have a different view of emotion. So that, I think, is really helpful.
Interesting, the play of culture. And since you touched upon the point around emotion, let me kind of start off with that particular piece is why people do what they do. What does neuroscience has to say from that standpoint?
Why people do what they do, behavior. I have been fascinated by why people do what they do since I was a child. As a little girl, I would be with all of the really old people. You know, as a little girl, everybody's old, but the very old people with the wonderful lines in their face and the glint in their eye, and I would be sitting there asking them everything and anything I could think of about what it was like when they were little, what it was like. So I've been driven always to try to find out why people do what they do, which is why I love to travel and spend time in different cultures. Why people do what they do, neuroscience, of course, it helps enormously because behavior changes our brain changes our behavior. By that, I mean that according to what we do, and there are several influences of the brain. For instance, we have our bottom up processing, which is our DNA and our immune system. We have our top down processing, which is our thoughts, our thinking, our beliefs, our mindset. And then we've got what I've already discussed is our social and environmental upbringing. All of that dictates how we wire our brain. And how we wire our brain dictates our behavior. But our behavior dictates how we wire our brain. So there's this constant feedback loop going on with neuroscience. So in terms of why people do what they do, it's incredibly enlightening with the discipline of neuroscience and psychology, and my other love, which is social anthropology. So when you're looking at why people do what they do, we can use other topics and cross-reference, which makes it a much richer, deeper understanding.
So that's an interesting segue into the link between social anthropology and cognitive neuroscience. So how do you kind of bring all of this together for a common listener like me and all of my listeners? What is the play with all of these three elements at work? Cognitive neuroscience, social anthropology.
Yeah. Yeah, neuroscience, social anthropology, and psychology. Each discipline has its own strengths, and each discipline will focus on something different. But each discipline is looking at why people do what they do. So, in psychology, of course, we have a huge wealth of theories about why people do things. And with social anthropology, we can look at medical anthropology, we can look at rituals, we can look at, oh, goodness me, religion, we can look at so many different aspects of a culture and try to understand what they do. And then we can then look more objectively using neuroscience and whittling that down to biological, very, very small biological view of things, and support or not our findings from those other disciplines. So we can a neuroscientist would not be considering social anthropology, and a social anthropologist wouldn't consider neuroscience. But if you do look at the whole lot, and I'd love to look at the whole lot, you get a much deeper understanding of human beings and human behavior.
And how do you see this in play in the normal business context that you have been working with so many successful business houses, business leaders? What are some of the traits that you have picked up and what's the inferences coming out of that?
I've owned 3 businesses in the past. And when I went back to academia, I got my doctorate in cognitive neuroscience, but I also have degrees in psychology and social anthropology, hence the triple interest. Because I'm a businesswoman from before that, and then I went through academia for 9 years full-time study, I brought it back out into the commercial world because I love business. We need businesses to make money for a culture to survive. That is extremely important to me. And business is a massive interest. So I take all of my knowledge into businesses and I talk about the way they communicate with one another. I talk about decision making. I talk about judgments. I talk about biases. I talk about relationships, business relationships. So basically, all my work with all of this stuff that I have learned in academia and all of my experience in business, I bring this under one umbrella of communication because virtually everything is about communication. When we communicate badly, we have conflict, we have war. When we communicate well, we have peace in terms of our individual relationships and globally and the bigger picture of things. And it's vital to understand things like if you have one town have always argued with another town and never communicated well, the anthropologists come in and they look at, well, hang on a minute, what goes on here, and how if this goes back 500 years or something, and that gives us an understanding of the perspective of each town. And that is vital. In business, it's the same thing. If one department is in conflict with another department, then you can go back to maybe the culture of the company when it was first formed, or indeed the board. If the board there is conflict going on in the board, then you might have some cultural problems, or indeed it might be nothing to do with culture. It might actually be to do with the personalities of 2 individuals on the board. So when a classic example that I get quite a lot is the board agreed to do something and then nothing is done. It's not helpful for business and it drives the CEO crazy because they thought it was going to be absolutely fine, and the next thing was going to happen and it doesn't, and then therefore there are more meetings and you go over the same old, and it's a disaster because nothing moves forward. So in business, all of this is extremely important, and the same with your customers and your clients, and the same with your relationship with immediate direct, your direct reports rather, and the same with their direct reports, and the same with the whole organization. There is so much that the work that I do involves everything to do with an organization.
Absolutely exciting. And you did mention about the role of communication, and somewhere you have also spoken about the significance of fun in communication or fun through communication. Tell us a bit more about it.
Okay, we have a tendency in business to take ourselves too seriously. Our work can be extremely serious, but to take ourselves seriously is not efficient or effective. For instance, if you have got a bank of employees working for you and everybody's under pressure, everybody's working hard, there's lots of things going on, there's change happening, there's all sorts of things going on. And the CEO or the MD or one of the board members or indeed one of the senior management team, they are stressed as well. And through their own stresses, they actually are too heavy, too serious, too pressured on the people who work for them. This will make their brain go into a fight or flight state. It will make their brain secrete far more secretions of cortisol, the stress hormone. And when that happens, when cortisol is in a chronic state, because of all these pressures coming from everything around us, all these pressures coming from our senior management and so on, that means that we put our blinkers on, put these we narrow our focus down to the perceived threat. So we can't help it. That is how we have to do. So all of this other stuff that goes on around us, all the innovation, all of the creative ideas, all the things that are going to grow the business are not happening. And it makes people anxious and it can lead to depression. Really, really a waste of time. Understandable, but a waste of time and a waste of any business growth that's going on or that's wished for. If we inject some fun in there, then we dissipate cortisol, we dissipate the feelings of stress and anxiety, and therefore we start to take those blinkers off, widen our vision so that we actually start looking at the creative things that are going on and the new ideas that will help business grow. And we actually feel better and we will not be sick so much. So, how do we inject fun? Well, say in the boardroom, you could start the board meeting by saying, right, everyone comes into a board meeting, okay, and they've got their car keys and they throw them on the table, they're on their phone, they're thinking, oh God, I haven't got time for this meeting, I've really got to do this, this and this. And but you said they've got to be in the room, you've got to get to the meeting and you've got to be efficient with the meeting. But take a few minutes first to speak to each person around the table and say, right, can you just start by telling us something that good has happened in the last 24 hours or since we last met? What to you personally are you willing to talk about that is a bit of fun, that actually we can enjoy listening to? Just a couple of minutes. And everybody's in the room, everybody becomes more interested in that person speaking. You go round the table, then the stresses have gone, everybody's thinking more creatively, everybody's in the room and not thinking about, oh my goodness, I should be doing X, Y, Z. So injecting a bit of fun into meetings, into any kind of meeting, into a day, will make a massive difference to how the brain operates and the efficiency of the organization.
Wonderful. There is your $1 million idea for all the listeners to make meetings fun and also look at organization productivity.
Yeah, totally. We miss the point sometimes. When we get too serious, we miss the point.
Absolutely. So, Lynda, we have been talking about neuroscience. We have been talking about your work in this area. Even before that, how did this all line up for Lynda? I believe you started off as a stewardess, now the journey to a neuroscientist. Walk us through that wonderful journey.
I know, it was amazing, really. I left school, and when I left school, I hadn't heard of a gap year. I don't even know if there was such a thing in those days. No idea at all. I just knew I wanted to travel. And I knew that I wanted to, again, pursue my love of trying to understand why people do what they do. So I thought, I was 19. I thought, well, probably the best thing I can do is apply for a job that enables me to travel. And I thought of applying to the shipping lines, but they don't take you till you're 21. So I applied to British Airways, and I was offered what in those days shuttle, long haul, and short haul. I got all three, and which is very lucky. And I chose long haul, so I thought, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it properly. I'll go as far away as I can and spend time in the countries. And in those days, we used to have a lot of time off in various countries. It's different these days, but then it was great. And I flew for 4.5 years, and I left to start my first business. And I started my business. I had two businesses to start with, both in the catering industry, which went very well. And then I became the owner of a health club, which I created from nothing. And that was my biggest business. And I had 20 staff and 2,000 members. And so I have been on this entrepreneurial path. And then I had children. I carried on being an entrepreneur. And then suddenly my father died, which was very unexpected. We thought he was extremely fit, but clearly not. And my dad used to say, Lynda, if there's anywhere you want to go that's spiritual, go to the Himalayas. Well, just after my dad died, I was at the school gates for my daughter. And one of the mums said to me, Lynda, I'm going to the Himalayas. I went, oh, I've got to come. I've got to come. Please let me come. I want to come. I said, sorry, no, you can't. There's no room left. I went, oh, okay. Didn't think any more about it. Then a couple of weeks later, she said, somebody's dropped out. Do you want to join us? I went, yes. I didn't even tell my husband. I just said, yes, I'm going. And it was a year and 3 days. I was up into the Himalayas on my very first trekking trip in Nepal. They opened, that's when we left, that's right. And then on the 4th of March was my father's birthday, and they opened a temple for me and gave him a ceremony. I was like, I was blown away. So I absolutely adored the Himalayas, loved it. And when I came home, I didn't want to be home. I was peace, man, and love, and I just wanted on this lovely journey to stay with me. And for 3 months, I was a dreadful mother, a dreadful wife, a dreadful only child to a widowed mother, because I just wanted to be away, back up there. I didn't want to be here. I'd look and stare at firelight for hours. We went to a dinner party and I stood up from the table and walked into the other room. I was so rude. I'd never do that in a million years normally. And after 3 months, I realized I was being unfair. So I took myself off. I thought, I've got to ground myself. I took myself off to night school and did what we call an A level in England here in English. And I thought, oh, I remember this. So then I thought, okay, love of travel. I think what I'll do is I'll go to university and do my first degree in social anthropology. But because I had children at school, I couldn't go to any university. I had to go to local universities, and they would only allow me to do social anthropology if I did a joint honours degree with another subject. So I chose psychology. I didn't want to choose psychology. I only wanted to study social anthropology. I only wanted to find out why people do what they do. So, a year into the course, social anthropology became really hard because it's this massive topic about everything. And I could write a 2,000 word essay and need 20,000 words because I'm going, yes, but what if? I was so enthusiastic. And I discovered that for the way I think, I found psychology easier. So I got my joint honours degree and then I did a master's in psychology. And I discovered that my professor for my master's was studying, one of the things he did, he was a brilliant man, a neuroscience, a neurophysicist of vision. But one of the many things he did was study consciousness. And I've been reading about consciousness since I was 14. I thought, oh, this is magical. So I asked him if he would supervise my PhD, and he said yes. So there you go. So I went from the cabin crew trying to find out why people do what they do, all the way through. The thread has been with me all my life to my doctorate, why people do what they do, and it just kept going. And now I've introduced all that knowledge into the business world. So I'm sorry, that was a short question and a very long answer.
And that's a wonderful thread how life takes one through these various journeys, right? And along this path that you have had, you have been a business owner, and now you're doing multitude of things. The question to you is, how do you make time for all of this? What's the secret sauce there?
Oh, that's the big question, isn't it? The big question, time. I always feel I haven't got enough, but I think the truth is one needs to be very honest about how you spend your time and look in the mirror and think, how much time have I spent doing something when I could have spent less time at it? So nowadays, I try to be very honest with how much time I work, how much time I spend with my family, how much time I go to the gym, how much time I see my friends, all of those things. For once in my life, and you've caught me at a good moment, for once in my life, I've actually got it right. Next week, I probably won't have. But at the moment, I'm spending my time wisely and managing to do everything I can very well. Let's hope it stays.
It's all about prioritizing what you would want to do.
Yeah, you need to be honest with yourself of where you're actually spending your time. And then you need to reevaluate that to think, well, okay, rather than spend an hour of that, I could have spent just 10 minutes. For instance, a social media post. If you're posting on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever method you choose, and once you've posted it, you're supposed to sort of monitor it till you answer people. But you could spend an hour, 2 hours doing that. That's not a useful way of spending time. So, give yourself 15 minutes with social media. So chunk the time down so that you can manage it more easily and more efficiently. That's what I try to do.
So, Linda, you are in the business leadership arena, bringing in your neuroscientist hat. So I had a couple of topics that I would want to kind of check on you, which is business leadership and the importance of neuroscience in managing change.
Change, yes. There is, especially in a situation like mergers and acquisitions, there or new people in the department or a new boss or a new CEO or something different going on in organizations happens constantly. And a lot of people resist it. A lot of people are afraid of it. The brain likes things that are the norm. It likes to use neural pathways that are very well myelinated so that it can be very effective and very efficient. It's not lazy, it's trying to handle as much information and as many things and behaviors and things that we have to do as possible. So it will default to the most myelinated neural pathways. It will default to mechanisms that are simple, that you can do below conscious awareness. That's efficient and effective. But when it comes to any kind of change that is now in our conscious awareness, and that will take our time and our energy, and the brain won't like that. It will try to default to mechanisms that are well used. However, what we must understand is that we are in a constant state of change ourselves. We're constantly rewiring, in soft wiring, we're constantly rethinking, we're constantly recalibrating, we're constantly state of flux, this state of change. So for us to resist change on a conscious level is actually rather futile. So what would be better is that we actually embrace change if it's worth embracing. Some change is not. So, as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if it's in a situation like there is a merger acquisition, or you do have a new boss, or you do have a new team leader, there will be changes. Then we need to understand that sometimes that change is very good. And if we put our hand up and go resist, 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 then if we're resisting it, we will not benefit. Because we need to embrace it so that we actually run with it. So to do that, you need to talk to people. You need to find out what's going on. We need, if you are a boss, you need to be transparent and open with everybody and communicate clearly. I think I've disappeared, have I, She? Transparency is key. If you are responsible for any change within an organization of any description, you've got to explain to people what's going on, and you need to get feedback from them. You need to know where they're coming from. You don't want to upset them. If you upset them, it will be counterproductive. So the answer is to communicate properly and communicate well. And that is where I'm coming from. So when it comes to change within an organization, transparency is key. Absolutely key. Because then people will come on board and work alongside you effectively. Curiosity. Curiosity is wonderful. Curiosity stimulates intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation, like bonuses, cars, anything like that, is great. They are motivators, but they lend themselves to people cheating. For instance, if you are have a sales force working for you, and those individuals may have made their numbers that month, they will sandbag. They will sandbag and hold them over for next month so that they get their bonuses and as maximum as they possibly can. So extrinsic motivation does tend to create a certain level of cheating, in inverted commas. Intrinsic motivation is very different, and that comes from a desire to wanting to learn. It comes from a desire to improve, and it comes from a place of curiosity as well. So curiosity enables us to be motivated to learn. It enables us to, even in a working environment, it enables us to take on board new information, new ways of doing things. Curiosity is how children best learn. I can remember learning my times table. It didn't stimulate curiosity at all. We had to learn it by rote, by going over it and practicing and practicing and practicing. Fine, we learned it. Gosh, it was boring. But if you learn from curiosity, then you just learn so well. You keep going. It feeds the soul, I think, curiosity.
What are some practices that you recommend one can look into to develop curiosity?
Okay, to develop curiosity, it's actually going back to almost that childlike behavior. It's actually going back to thinking about looking at something properly and being in wonder of it. Looking at a new piece of technology and thinking, my goodness me, that is just unbelievable. Or how does that work? Or looking at in wonderment of something in nature. It doesn't matter what it is. But if we can go back to practicing being in wonderment at something, and then that will lead to curiosity. That will how does that actually work? If I push that, what happens? If I press that button, what happens? And you start to build upon that curiosity because you're practicing it. It's being very open-minded. Curiosity, when you're open-minded, is a very good combination. And it enable people to develop and grow more easily.
And Lynda, in the work that you do, it's also about taking people from an unconscious no to a conscious no. In that process, the thinking needs to get recalibrated. So, how does one recalibrate their thinking?
One, it recalibrates one's thinking by actually with honesty and curiosity. You do that because if you have got unconscious biases, or we've all got unconscious biases, everybody's got unconscious bias. It's normal, but it's not socially acceptable in many ways. But if you are developing in that way, then it is that curiosity, that open-mindedness that will enable you to recalibrate. So be willing to look at something differently. Be willing to take on new information and evaluate it, recalibrate that information into your thinking already so that you can grow. It's terrible when people get stuck in their ways, stuck in their thinking, and then they're not living their days well. There's a sense of apathy. Apathy I find very difficult to handle. It's that energy, that feeling of excitement and being enthralled with something that we're looking for. And when we do that, we recalibrate our thinking and we feel that our day has been worthwhile. We're all here for a finite length of time, and to waste our time is a sin in my mind. To use our time beautifully and doing things that enable us to develop and grow, whichever way we choose to grow, is a great thing. So that enables recalibration. We recalibrate all the time.
We recalibrate all the time, we are changing all the time, and we need to develop curiosity all the time. These are some of the pieces where we can enhance our own conscious thinking as we kind of work in a very unconscious way of our emotions processing the thoughts.
We actually have more power than we think. We have, I use the word control very carefully because people can misunderstand it, but we actually have more control over the way we think than we realize. If we are open and to new information, to new data, to new input, whatever that may be, and recalibrate our thinking, then we do definitely spend our time better.
So here we are with Dr. Lynda Shaw and the Power of Three round. The first of the Power of Three, Lynda, is three routines that is unique to Lynda.
Unique to me. Okay, unique to me. My family are central to my well-being, my universe. I love to dance, and I've got a naughty sense of humor.
Good start. Three book recommendations on neuroscience and communication.
I'm a great fan of the work of Oliver Sacks. Oliver Sacks is, sadly, he left this planet 3 or 4 years ago now. He's a wonderful writer, and I highly recommend his book, Musicophilia. If you want to understand neuroscience and the effect music has on the brain, which is fascinating, and we don't understand it properly. So, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks. Another one, Oliver Sacks, is the man who mistook his hat. The man mistook his coat. Just if you start with the man who mistook Oliver Sacks, you will find it. Fascinating look into neuroscience. And I would recommend Lisa Feldman Barrett, her work on emotion. So check out her as well. You'll find that interesting on neuroscience.
3 insights that you would provide to the older self of Lynda.
You're doing really great. Just hang in there and keep going. Be kind. Always be kind. First and foremost. It's very all well and good to be clever and smart, but being kind is far more fun. Just enjoy the journey.
Lynda, what are the 3 micro experiments that you would recommend our listeners to consider to be doing?
Next time you're in the cinema or the theatre and you're sitting down and in front of you are lots of people and all you can see are their backs, look at one person's back, one only, and keep looking at that person and see if they turn round. Because 9 times out of 10, that one person will turn round, and they won't know why they turn round, but they will turn round. And perhaps that is an argument for unconscious processing. So maybe worth having some fun with that. Anything to do with unconscious processing is fantastic to understand if you can. The consciousness is a massively complicated topic. Hugely. It's a conundrum. It's the last frontier of human knowledge at the moment. So anything you can find like that. Another one, an experiment. When you are talking with somebody whom you normally have a conversation with, I would like you very much to say something completely out of character. So for instance, if you are have a conversation with somebody, say for instance on the board, and you know what they're going to say next. So you almost interrupt them and they almost know what you're going to say next. And you've got this conversation that is not enlightening for either of you because you're second guessing what they're going to say. The experiment is this: when you're in this exchange, have a go at saying something completely out of character, completely different, and watch how they respond. Because first of all, they'll be shocked. And then they will now think about how they're talking to you more accurately and with more consciously. And then you might have a far better conversation because of it. Just picking up the phone and ringing somebody you haven't spoken to for a very long time. And just the experiment is this: monitor how better you feel for it and how better you make them feel.
If somebody were to pursue a course in social anthropology, what are the 3 courses they can look up to? Or it can be in psychology as well. If people were to pick 3 courses between social anthropology or psychology, what 3 courses would you recommend, Lynda?
Okay, the 3 topics that I love most: social anthropology, psychology, and neuroscience. I would strongly suggest that whatever course you go on, you make sure that it's from a very good source. There is an awful lot especially in the world of neuroscience, it's a very popular topic, and there's a lot of people out there who are teaching misinformation. So please, whatever course you go on, make sure that you do your research and know that the person who's running that program is well qualified. I run a program on neuroscience. It's an online course, 6 weeks long, and I dispel an awful lot of myths on that program and give properly well researched information. So that is my big tip. My big tip is that if you are looking at social anthropology, for instance, it is less popular, which means that there are less people offering programs. So I would go to a university and study social anthropology that way. And in psychology as well, I would again go to a university, do a foundation program, a beginner's program or undergraduate, or probably a remote program would be easier for a lot of people. And that gives you the choice of going to some of the better universities in the world. That's my advice.
Wonderful advice there. Lynda, the last of the power of three round is 3 tips to overcome imposter syndrome.
Right. Okay. First of all, there are some companies, some organizations that are hiding behind the tag of imposter syndrome. It is very easy for an organization to say, this is your problem, you've got imposter syndrome, go and fix it. Actually, what is the problem is the culture of the organization, not the individual. So one has to be careful of that. In terms of if you have imposter syndrome, I suggest that you remember and write down when you didn't feel an imposter, when you felt that you were in control of your destiny, when you felt that you were in control of your job. Write it down and remember it. Remember it. Again, another one is if you believe you have imposter syndrome, it's time to talk to somebody, your boss of some description, not necessarily talking about imposter syndrome, but certainly by saying something like, I actually would like to do some more training. Can you help me out with some training program or whatever so that I can feel stronger in what I do? And the other thing is about imposter syndrome is that actually it might be good. It might actually strengthen us because we are not going to be cocky and arrogant. We are going to feel that we are going to do something about this and learn more.
Hey, there you go. One of the best in the field talking about imposter syndrome, talking about micro experiments, talking about some of the courses one can look up to if they're interested in psychology or in the field of social anthropology. So, as we move along, Lynda, what are some potential real world applications or implications of cognitive neuroscience research? And how do you see the field evolving in the future?
Okay. The I'm an extremely practical woman. If I'm not useful, you'll find me in a corner, crouched down, sucking my thumb, rocking and crying. So I have to be useful. And neuroscience, the problem with neuroscience is a lot of people think, oh my goodness, that's really interesting, but so what? And the so what matters. So it has to have a practical application. If we understand a little bit how the brain works, we will understand why that person is behaving the way they are, and what we can do about it to enable a better relationship with that person. It enables us to take a much more objective look at the way we are handling our business relationships. And I believe that moving forwards with the influence of AI, that is going to become more and more important because it is human interaction that we are going to be badly in need of. So we need to understand how to have that human interaction better. And the way we do that is to understand the brain a bit more. We understand how we can problem solve better, how we can make better judgments, how we can make better decisions, how we can use emotion better rather emotion using us. There is so much for a practical application that we can use now and in the future. That's why neuroscience is very important, especially if you're ambitious, and especially if you want to run your own business or have your own business and you are indeed working for an organization where you're dealing with people.
Lynda, this show is about creating ripples of inspiration. Before we sign off, what is Dr. Lynda Shaw's Inspire Someone Today message?
You know, everybody's here on the same ticket. We're all here on the same ticket. We all come into this world the same way as we go out. So therefore, have compassion for one another. Strive to understand people better, because if we have compassion, we have peace. We have a peaceful life, and other people will have a better life because of it. So my inspiration is this: stay curious, have fun, and be kind and compassionate.
What a wonderful message there. Stay curious, have compassion, create a peaceful world. Lynda, on that note, thank you so much for being part of this show. Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.